Have you ever been in a high-pressure situation and suddenly felt like you've lost all ability to think clearly? You might have felt your body reacting with sweaty palms, quickened heart rate, and shallow breathing. If so, you've experienced the fight-flight-freeze response. The fight-flight-freeze response is a crucial part of human biology that's helped us evolve and survive over thousands of years. But how does it work? And more importantly, how does it impact our modern-day lives? Keep watching to find out. I'm Camilla, I'm a psychologist, and I'm on a mission to spread mental health awareness and make better mental well-being available to more people. The fight-flight-freeze response is a survival mechanism that our body activates in response to perceived danger. It's a built-in response that enables us to either fight, flee, or freeze to protect ourselves from perceived harm. This response system stems way back to our caveman days, and it's so ingrained in our biology that it's completely instinctive and automated. Back in our caveman days, this would protect us from dangers and ensure our survival. But in our modern-day lives, the same response can really trip us up. So how does the fight-flight-freeze response work? It all starts in the brain with what's called our amygdala. The amygdala is a small almond-shaped structure at the center of our brain. It's responsible for processing emotions and for triggering the fight-flight-freeze response in response to perceived danger. We can think of the amygdala as our guard dog. The amygdala responds to a potential threat in a fraction of a second, and long before we're consciously aware of it, it sends a signal to another part of our brain, the hypothalamus. This triggers the release of adrenaline and other stress hormones, such as cortisol, to activate the fight-flight-freeze response. This sets off a whole bunch of physical and cognitive changes in our body to help us survive the threat. In psychology, we call this the amygdala hijack. Some of the things we might be able to observe happen in our body during this amygdala hijack are 1. Increased heart rate. The adrenaline released during this fight-flight-freeze response increases the heart rate, which pumps more blood to the muscles to provide energy and strength needed to respond to the threat. 2. Rapid breathing. The body also increases its breathing rate to take in more oxygen to help power the muscles. We might notice this as a shallow and rapid breathing. 3. Dilated pupils. The pupils dilate in response to the fight-flight-freeze response to improve our visual ability and to help us better assess our surroundings. 4. Increased alertness. The heightened level of adrenaline causes us to become more alert and focused. This can help us respond quickly and more effectively to the threat. 5. Muscle tension. The muscles tense up to prepare us for action. We might see this as a clenching of our jaws and fists or a stiffness of the body. 6. Sweating. The body may also produce more sweat, which helps us regulate our body temperature during intense physical activity. 7. Suppressed digestion. The fight-flight-freeze response also impacts our digestive system. This is because the body diverts blood flow away from the digestive system and towards the muscles. 8. Reduced pain sensitivity. The adrenaline released during the fight-flight-freeze response can also reduce pain sensitivity. This allows us to continue to respond to a physical threat even if we're injured. 9. Dry mouth. The fight-flight-freeze response can cause the mouth to become dry due to increased breathing and decreased saliva production. And finally, 10. A suppressed immune system. The fight-flight-freeze response can temporarily suppress the immune system because the body diverts resources to respond to the immediate perceived threat. Now, all these 10 physical changes in our body are really helpful if we're faced with a physical threat. They're all designed to enable us to either fight a threat or flee from a threat. You might notice that a lot of these physical things that happen during the acute fight-flight-freeze response are also the same physical changes we see as symptoms during a long-term stress reaction. For example, the increased alertness that we experience during this response is the reason why we often suffer from difficulty sleeping when we're experiencing long-term stress. Now, all these physical effects are fine, but unfortunately, all the resources, all the energy to power that fight-flight-freeze response has to be taken from somewhere. That means that our body deprioritizes our thinking brain, our prefrontal cortex. This is where all our executive brain functions are located. So that's things like planning, decision-making, thinking clearly, concentrating. It's also where our working memory lives. So during the fight-flight-freeze response, all these executive functions are suppressed. And that's great if we're about to be eaten by a tiger, or if we're about to step out onto the road in front of a moving car. In those situations, it'll help us act quickly and instinctively to save our lives. Unfortunately, in most modern-day high-pressure situations, it's not very helpful at all. The amygdala doesn't differentiate between modern-day stressors and real life-threatening situations. Both activate the same fight, flight, freeze response. Think of situations where you might have experienced these physical changes in your body. These might be situations like exams, job interview, public speaking engagements, or a tight deadline at work. In all these situations, what we need the most is the ability to think clearly and be rational in our decision-making and behavior. These are the exact cognitive abilities that we see suppressed by the amygdala hijack. This can lead us to impulsive and irrational behavior as we're no longer in control of our emotions and thoughts. For example, we might find that we make hasty decisions, speak before we think, or otherwise behave in a manner that's not consistent with our usual thoughtful responses. Now, the real problem arises if we're experiencing long-term stress or anxiety, as we'll often see an overly active amygdala and a sustained high alert state of being in the fight, flight, freeze response. Now, you see, the physical and cognitive effects of the fight, flight, freeze response are only meant to last while you're in immediate danger and should subside once the perceived threat has passed. However, if the fight, flight, freeze response is repeatedly activated by long-term stress or anxiety, it can have a negative effect on our body and lead to physical and mental health issues. We see that the common symptoms of stress are strongly linked with the effects that we see in the fight, flight, freeze response. We often see both physical and cognitive symptoms of stress. These can be symptoms like increased heart rate, poor sleep quality, impacted digestive system, decreased working memory, and feeling overwhelmed more easily. There are many more symptoms of stress to be aware of, which all stem from this fight, flight, freeze response. If you're unsure what they are, I have a video explaining all the most common symptoms of stress that you need to be aware of and look out for. I'll link it at the end so you can watch that next. If we think of the caveman again, his fight, flight, freeze response would be activated when he was faced with a tiger who was trying to eat him. He would use the physical boost of the response to either fight or flee from the tiger. If he'd survive, he'd make it back to his cave to rest and recover. The threat would be over and his system would return to his normal state of calm after the recovery phase. If we think of this in a modern day situation where someone might perceive constant threats in their environment and therefore be in a high alert state all the time, then we don't see this all-important recovery phase. This is why it's so important that we're actively aware of our need for recovery. We need to ensure a sufficient recovery period when we come out of a high-pressure time in our life. We can think of this like a pendulum that swings between being active and being in rest. It's really important that we constantly try to keep this balance between the demands that we face in our life and the resources that we have available. If you want to learn how to do this, make sure to check out this video next. So what can we do about this fight, flight, freeze response? We can't stop the response as it's all instinctive and natural, but what we can do is learn and practice how to quickly return to our calm state. This can be achieved through grounded exercising and breathing techniques. I'll make sure to cover those in coming videos. Next week, I'll explain the process that the brain goes through to assess if a situation is a threat or not. Make sure to subscribe to not miss out on any of it. If you are experiencing stress and finding yourself hijacked by your amygdala more often than you'd like, then you can start by noticing the changes in your body and mind when this happens. Knowing and understanding what your body is going through can in and of itself help reduce the effect and return to a calm state quicker. Try taking a deep breath and labeling the experience. Try telling yourself, this is my fight, flight, freeze response that's activating. It will pass. I am okay. If you've taken any value from this video at all, please give it a like. I hope to see you in the next one. Take care and bye for now.